So let's see. So here we are to talk about how no one sits by silently. And during this moment, sadly, you all are going to sit by silently for just a little bit, and then we're going to all participate. I'm showing you a picture here. This is me on the right, if you can see my cursor on the far right, with part of the team from the Assembly, Test, and Launch Operations, or in NASA speak, ATLO, the ATLO portion of Psyche mission. And so I'm the lead of the NASA Psyche mission, and we finally, after 10 years of work, we've gotten to the point where we're building the spacecraft. And so this is our spacecraft in the background, up on a dolly. This is our high gain antenna in silver. It's taller than I am. And this is part of the team that was working on the day that I went to visit a couple weeks ago, the build of the spacecraft. And the reason I'm showing you this is because it's a lot of the motivation for the things I've been working on in terms of teaming. I just wanted to tell you a tiny bit about my own background before I went on to talk about the ideas we're going to talk about today. And so I went to college not quite knowing what I wanted to study. I did not have this idea that I wanted to run a space mission or that I wanted to be a planetary scientist. Like, I actually for a while just wanted to be a veterinarian because I love animals so much. Then I kind of learned that most animals don't like veterinarians, and that actually kind of got me off the topic. So I went to college and I got my master's at the same time, but then I wasn't ready to go on to research. So I worked in business for 10 years. I worked as a management consultant and learned about organizations, and I worked in the magazine industry. And then for a while, I ran my own little company writing business plans for high-tech ventures that were looking for venture capital. And some of the things I learned while I was doing those various experiences was that my day-to-day happiness entirely relied upon the team I was working with. The team I was working with mattered so much more than actually the content of what we were doing. And so I began to think that maybe my ideal world would be one where I worked with a team where the whole was really more than the individual contributions, which does not always happen, as we know, and where there was some meaning to what we were doing that really mattered to me. And that was more important to me than where I was working or the broader issues, really. And then I went back to academia. And I started my PhD when I was 31, so that's like 10 years too late by physical science standards, although I think people are kind of loosening up about that. And I was a single mother at the time, and my son started kindergarten the same week I started my PhD. And so I was really acclimated to a kind of a family and team orientation. And suddenly I was at MIT, and I was suddenly in this crazy situation where every principal investigator was like a separate city state. And that's what really set me up to start thinking about teams. So here we are with my idea of the hero model. And so this is where everything that I'm talking about kind of starts. Most of academia, most organizations in general are built upon this hero model. One person, the hero, owns their topic or their subfield or their team, and they control this mountain of whatever size of people and resources. And sure, there are lots of benefits to this model, and it's served good purposes through the centuries, but there are two really big problems with it. The first one is that progress becomes incremental. Knowledge is added like slices of real estate around the mountain, and until they bump into some other mountain. So that's the first problem. It kind of limits because you own your topic, and it creates this competition between the mountains where leadership begins to be built on ego instead of on actual progress, and where you make these relatively small incremental improvements because you're competing with the next mountain instead of collaborating. And the second big problem with the hero culture, the hero model, is culture. The hero culture is not necessarily inclusive or just or even safe for anyone but the hero. And I am super opposed to the notion of heroes. I think that it makes most people feel like they're doing something that I can't do instead of they're doing something I can do. And they're doing something where they're getting all the glory and leading instead of saying like, this is where we're all doing it together. And so this is kind of the model that got me thinking. So in the remainder, like 10 minutes here, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the construction of a team, and I want to talk about the culture of a team. Oops, I keep clicking the wrong thing. I'm sorry. There we go. All right. So two big questions. How can we construct project teams that are not based on the hero model? And how do we solve the biggest problems in the most efficient way? These are the two things that I'm really trying to work on. And in Interplanetary Initiative, we've made a concerted effort to design new ways to build interdisciplinary teams, project teams that avoid the hero model and move more quickly toward important solutions. So this is what we call our big questions team building process. We've been working on it for 4 years. And it goes like this. Most of the time when you want to start a seed project in academia, you invite people to bring you proposals, and then you're falling directly back into the hero model. This is one person, the leader, saying, I have this great idea, and I'm willing to work on it if you pay me. It's about me and my idea. So instead of doing that, we bring together as many people as we can into a room, and we start brainstorming the biggest questions that need to be answered in order to get to the outcome we're looking for. And it can be like any guardrails can be put up. We're working in this space, this design space. What are the biggest questions we need to answer to reach success here? Then as a group, we vote on the most important ones, and then we volunteer into teams. That process usually takes about an hour. And then we have another hour. Each team gets to decide upon 1-year milestones, and then they choose a leader. So there's no leader till then. There's no leader until after they decide on their milestones. And then we send them away for 2 weeks. And if they can come back with a budget and clearly defined milestones and the full interdisciplinary team that they need, then we give them some seed funding. And the seed funding isn't very much, 10K, 15K for a year to do their things. And so the first time I did this, you can imagine I was terrified. I figured the minute that we released everybody into the next team, the next room to volunteer into teams, we would never hear from them again. They'd all be scooting down the staircase. And that is not what happened. Everyone went into the next room, formed their teams, got really enthusiastic. The teams started going, we funded them. And in 4 months, over the summer, we had our first peer-reviewed paper come out from these teams. And so we've had all kinds of outcomes, because we don't care just about peer-reviewed papers. We care about people being involved and inspiration and events and things that everyone can read. And so far, over the past 4 years, we've seed funded 20 pilot projects, and these have gone on to win grants and philanthropic support that have produced an 8 times return on investment in our original seed funds. And in general, the teams have been more egalitarian, more inclusive, and more diverse. And so we feel like it's a nice step towards some progress. So that's the first thing, building teams. That was very inspired by the kind of teams I saw on Psyche Mission, where every discipline was there and valued because the discipline was needed. I am very opposed to this world where we start to judge people based on their job title as to whether or not they have something important to contribute. It is so wrong and so damaging. And so if you know the contribution that each person is expected to make, then they're more respected. All right, so then why does positive team culture matter after you've made your interdisciplinary team? I would say, first of all, because we can make better decisions. Culture is, by definition, the display of behaviors. It's how we treat each other. And so it turns out that a better culture makes for better decisions. And there are actually social science studies that I'm sure some of you are aware of, where this has been examined, and it finds that even people who you think of as being very good under pressure, like medical teams, if they have a more bullying coach, they make life-threatening mistakes. And if they have a more supportive coach, they make the right decisions. And so it does really matter. Project risk is reduced. And we have a little motto on Psyche Mission, which is the best news is bad news brought early. Because for attraction and retention of talent, you've got to be able to allow people to not be bullied and to bring forward their problems and to not be judged on things that have to do with implicit bias. And so rudeness, bullying, and harassment all reduce diversity. There's a great social science study that shows that if fewer than like 25 to 30% of the people around you are people you think of as being like you, then you feel alone. And if you feel alone and you're in a bullying culture, you're going to be the first one to leave. I mean, why would you stay there where clearly there's no future for you by yourself instead of going someplace else? So hiring rubrics don't matter unless you have a good culture. So a couple of other thoughts about team norms. So one team norm I really love is every voice is heard. It's something I work on all the time. There are so many reasons why a given person might not feel able to speak up. And invite people to speak and don't prejudge them based on obviously skin color or origin or gender or job title. And I like to think about kind of the Quaker business practice, which is that no one speaks twice until everyone has spoken once. I kind of love that. And then believe, yes, age, absolutely, all the reasons, whatever your bias might be, just take them on what they have to say instead of any judgment you might have about them. So believe that everyone comes with best intentions. You know, it's quite amazing how often it is that just a few really curt and rude responses to somebody kind of implying that they've done something wrong or they didn't even try to do the right thing really shuts down dialogue. And it's hard to control when you're under super amounts of pressure, but very, very critical to remind yourself all the time that basically everyone's coming with their best intentions. And then bring problems and challenges to the whole team and invite people to solve them with you. So leaders don't need to stand alone or lie sleepless at night over problems that are hard to solve. Invite people to help, be transparent. It'll relieve your stress and give people a sense of ownership and value. And I've done this with Psyche Mission in a way that seems really obvious to me. And it turns out it's not at all obvious and unusual in teams, which is that I've tried to be absolutely as transparent as possible all the time with NASA headquarters. And so when we give our reviews, I say, you know, here are the places where we think we're doing fine, and so let's not pay any attention to them. Here are the places where we have challenges. These are the things we've done so far. What do you think we could do better? Like, what are your ideas? Help us out. And then suddenly, instead of making them angry and wanting to rebuke us, they're on our side. We're all trying to solve it together. It turns out most of them don't do that with NASA missions. And it's also rare in academia. And it's rare in the other universities where I've been in leadership positions. And so that's a very powerful norm, I think. And then treat everything as an experiment. This is very hard to do. Everybody says this, lean startup, you know, entrepreneurial kind of things, everything, everybody says, you know, failures are okay, you know, fail fast, fail often. The fact is, it's super hard to actually do that institutionally. You know, the object is not to outlaw mistakes, because actually that's impossible, and making people nervous is really counterproductive. And NASA Associate Administrator Thomas Zurbuchen said, the goal is to catch all the mistakes. We'll never as humans be able to stop making mistakes, but with a team, we can catch them. And so that's again a reason to let everyone speak up. And it's especially true for a team like Psyche, where the person who is, you know, 10 levels down from me in the organizational chart. And we have a team of 800 people, and our budget is almost $1 billion. And so there are hundreds of people on this team I've never met. I don't know who they are, but it's the person down there on the line who knows the design flaw that's going to cause us to fail in flight. And if we don't listen to that young person, then we are going to fail, and we're going to lose this gigantic mission that we've been working on for a decade. And so making it possible for people to stand up and point out problems without nervousness is so important. So those are the main things that I wanted to contribute to the conversation today. First of all, a way to build project teams that might get us away from the hero model. And second of all, the need for especially leadership to speak loudly about team culture and perhaps set up norms as a collaborative process with your team so that we can set up those expectations to allow every voice to be heard and to allow the best news to be bad news brought early so that we can really succeed well. And these are topics that I hadn't previously been encouraged in academia as a professor to really pay attention to. The message I got in the very traditional kind of East Coast universities was, if you need to talk about culture, it means you're too weak to make it. And so I don't think we have a lot of that at ASU, but I'm sure you all have been in circumstances where this kind of discussion wasn't necessarily welcome. And so now I feel like I can stand up like on my bully pulpit and say it really matters, because it turns out this is one of the reasons that NASA selected Psyche team, because they saw us trading off questions to each other, answering together, not having to be the hero. And they decided that one of the top suggestions for success or indicators of future success is to have a high functioning team. And so that's part of the reason we were selected. So now I can stand up and say, having a good team culture is worth $1 billion. It's not for the weak. And so I hope that these ideas added a little bit to your thought process. And so because, you know, I know that we don't have whole teams here today. So this is why Michelle and I thought that we would have each of you think about them individually. And so what we're going to do right now is ask you guys to think about a couple of inspirations or even one that you might take from any of these things that we're talking about. And these are some guiding questions that might help you think about what that inspiration might be. I'm sorry, aspirations I'm saying inspirations, I mean aspirations. So find one or two or maybe three aspirations that might spring from what we're talking about, and then find one or two or three results. And what we're going to do is we're going to stay quiet for at least a full minute, which is a long time. And during that minute, I want you to be like writing like a crazy thing, or thinking, or like crafting your favorite single one of the aspirations and the results. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to use the chat. And oh my gosh, they're calling us back already. All right. Michelle, do we have time to finish?
Yeah, no, that's just a reminder that we should be talking about SOAR by now.
Oh, okay. So we're on time. Okay, good. I thought they were calling us back. It was panicking me. All right. So then after our minute of silence, what we're going to do is we're going to ask everyone to chat, first to type their aspiration or aspirations into the chat, but not hit enter until everybody's ready after a few seconds. Then we'll all hit enter at the same time, and we can all look at each other's aspirations, and hopefully we'll have a minute to talk about them. And you can also copy them out for looking at everybody else's ideas. And then we'll do the same thing with results. And Michelle and I will go through those lists that you add in the chat, and then we'll report out to the whole group a little later today when it's our time to report out. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start a timer for 1 minute and give us 1 minute to try to write down one or two each of aspirations and results quietly to ourselves. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Everybody's with us? Okay, ready and go. Okay, how are we doing? Do you feel ready? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, great. All right, so here's our plan. So I would like everybody to, without hitting enter, just go ahead and type aspirations, one or more aspirations into the chat. And maybe like put your hand up or something to indicate when you're done. That is awesome. And if you don't have your video on, which of course is totally fine, you can always raise the virtual hand. All right, looks like lots of people are getting ready, are almost ready. Not everybody, still waiting. A few more minutes. Not everybody has to do this, of course. It's not like we're gonna count names and go, John, you haven't raised your hand yet. What do you think, Michelle? Are we almost ready? Do we have a quorum? All right, everybody, ready to hit enter? Hit enter. I love it because it's just a sort of false sense of anticipation and very exciting. All right. So let's all take a moment to just read through some of these. So aspirations, to have a team vote on the project they think we should start. Okay, oh, this is great. Trust and respect. Work in a highly collaborative team. Inclusion of all. I love that, of course. Faculty evaluations that acknowledge team-based effort equally with individualized effort. Oh my gosh, that's one of my longtime wishes too. Learn how to help others feel that their voices are valued. I feel like we should have there must be people who've written out sort of step-by-step ways and little tricks and processes for that one. It's a really big one, but it's not easy. That takes a lot of emotional intelligence. Does anybody want to speak up and share their aspiration and say a few more words about it? Clearly let members know their value on the team. Explicitly say their support for each person. I'm suspecting that for some of you, you're feeling that personally also. You wish that you were also completely acknowledged and supported and heard, don't we all? So it's kind of two things, isn't it? How do we help each other speak? And I would say to the faculty in faculty meeting, when I was running faculty meetings, think about turning to someone who hasn't spoken yet and inviting them to speak rather than speaking a second time. So setting up little processes and procedures, I think is good. These are fantastic aspirations. I really love them. And I also would think it would be great if we could all keep collaborating on this over the coming year. It's possible that we could, for example, share over Slack ideas and things that have worked and kind of set up some best practices. I think it would be pretty great.
I have an experience that I could share.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I was a leader of a team a little while back where I had an interesting dichotomy in communications with my team. And it seemed that when we were out in a bullpen area, standing almost in an environment where it seemed like we were just, we were very informal, that communications were easy and they flowed. Whereas when I brought people into my office to discuss work topics, I would bring up an idea and ask for feedback and get nothing. And so, I hadn't even thought until just this moment how the environment affected their willingness to speak up.
That is such a great example, such a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Fantastic. Yeah, those kinds of things keep catching me. Like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it. And now that I did, it's so obvious. So this is the kind of thing we can keep sharing. Are you guys ready to do results? Ready? Oh, John, did you just want to say something?
I just wanted to let people know that there's a number of tools out there already. Native American talking circles. I did a training with some people up in Washington State, Pure Spirit Circle. Food co-ops have been always interested in this kind of work and making sure that everybody gets heard. So there's a lot of stuff out there already to help people.
There's a huge number of tools and a huge number of Harvard Business Review articles and all kinds of things like that. So everybody can go collect tools. It depends on what kind of feels like it fits into your team culture. Some of them feel too artificial and other of them are not powerful enough. All right, let's do results. Everyone type in one or more results, but don't hit enter, and so that we can have that anticipation. Why don't you take down your hands and then put them back up again when you're ready, when you are ready with your results. Maybe some of you have already done that and the hands up mean you are ready. Michelle, how are we doing? Do we have another 1 minute?
Assuming we're still ending at 12:10, we should have another 7 minutes. So I think we're doing
Perfect.
great.
Okay, good. So they gave us our extra minutes. It didn't take any away at the end. Open environment where new ideas can flourish. Teamwork and support of all team members. New definition of consciousness and dynamics of emotion. Blind spots can be revealed. That is gigantic. When you're brave enough to have a team where people can talk about the problems and the failures, then you begin to realize what you're not seeing. I love that. Let's see, employee retention. That is one of the real KPIs that you can use to judge culture, is retention. I think that's a really good one. Highly collaborative, engaging, happy, performing teams is kind of our dream space, isn't it? Oh, no one feels like they said too much. That's a really, really good one. Love that. Does anybody want to share one of their favorite results that they'd be looking for?
I will. It comes back to what you said in the beginning about your team and why you got the Psyche grant and this wonderful initiative you're on now. Is you had this team that worked really well together, and it was seen that this was happening, and that's what I see is like when people see these highly functioning teams, and those teams tend to get rewarded, and that produces better outcomes for everybody because these teams are producing things that benefit everybody.
Yes. They really feed on each other, and we're experiencing something like this. I'll just add this little moment in Psyche team right now. Most of the team actually really high functioning, and that's what's taken us through COVID. You can imagine how hard it is to build a spacecraft during COVID. But then we have one subcontractor who has a very different culture, and their culture is leave us alone. We don't want to talk to you. We will give you the thing when the thing is ready. And one of the things that goes along with that, with their kind of sense of ownership and privacy, is that they don't like to take ownership of mistakes because they don't want anybody to know about their mistakes. They're going to solve them personally and then give us the product at the end. Instead of being kind of like a subcontractor, they want to be their own separate organization. That's been really tough to negotiate our way through, actually. And so part of the challenge with Have Every Voice Heard is make sure also that people continually listen to themselves and try to tune up the quality of their contributions. That's the other part. It can't just be like everybody gets to talk randomly. And that's the hard part of it. Does somebody else have an experience to share, or a result that you'd like to discuss at all? I love that communication rewarded as a deliverable. I don't know, Jennifer, do you want to say more about that? That's a great one.
I feel like I'm talking a lot. That one just kind of came to my head. Not just a means to an end, but a metric for success.
That is a really cool idea. It sounds like something we could do self-assessment on. If you can keep reminding people of the goals for their communication and kind of ask themselves, did they meet those goals? There could be a kind of a private self-assessment that might help people tune up. that is what I wanted to share, except one other thing, which I'm just going to share my screen again, which is, oops, of course, I shared it privately to myself. That's always helpful. This is a slide that I show at the end of my science talks, and especially about teamwork and education talks. And the words bold and kind are not ones that are common in the professorship of physical sciences. Hopefully they're more common in other areas, some of which that you guys are in. But they're things that I remind myself of, hoping to become a little better at all of these skills that we're talking about today. So I really appreciate all of you joining this session, and I would love to hear any feedback people have in future about how things go. And Michelle and I are going to prep some feedback for the right moment after lunch break. Any last comments or thoughts from anybody before we close up?
This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, Allison. I really appreciate it.
I do want to say, Lindy, there was some interest in the chat earlier about any articles, references that you might point us to. Maybe that's something we can even bring back during the gallery walk. There was a lot of interest in some of the research behind these big ideas you're sharing.
I do have somewhere the Israeli medical study and the percentage of feeling like you're a part or not a part, but I don't have them nicely organized on my computer. So I doubt that I can find them in time for the breakout, but let me try to find them and I can send them to Michelle if that's okay later, and maybe you can distribute.
Absolutely. I think the Empower Lobby would be a great place that I can help follow up with that, because there was several people interested.
That would be great. Thanks so much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again a little bit in the main session.